Welcome, all listeners. This is something new for me. We're starting this, and hope you are hopping along with me on this. So I don't want to call this a podcast because a podcast gives you a commitment, and I'm not willing to commit to anything. We're going to do this. We'll see how it goes. So our first guest on our not podcast is Mr. David Joyandeh. He is an attorney that I use on a lot of my deals. And I could tell you, I work with a lot of attorneys, and David is the best.
Thank you, Moshe.
We will, as we go on, we'll ask him why we need an attorney. But if you are in the process of real estate and you need an attorney, call up Mr. David. Without further ado.
Thank you, Moshe. First of all, thank you for having me on your Not podcast. And you're right, it's good to have a chance to talk about real estate, talk about what we're seeing, talk about strategies and ideas and how to make things better for people out there that are looking to buy real estate. Before we begin, just a bit about myself. I am a real estate attorney. My name is David Joyandeh. I'm a partner at Buckalew Frizzell Crevina. We have an office in Glen Rock, which is in Bergen County, but I have clients that are buying real estate throughout New Jersey. I have clients that buy in Bergen County, Union County, Essex County. I have a client actually now buying 4 properties in Atlantic City as we speak. So I have clients up and down the Jersey border. I have commercial clients, residential clients. I kind of go real estate matters. And I'm here for my clients. Clients know to reach me directly. I share my cell phone number with all my clients. They have my cell phone number at all times. They know how to get in touch with me directly. When I work with people and when I collaborate with realtors on deals, we're always working together as a team. Our goal is to make sure the deal is as smooth as possible. I mean, it's tricky and dicey, but our goal is to make it as easy as possible. That's our goal.
And I can say that work was really a pleasure because he never disappeared like some others.
Right. And I think not only that, it's more about a team effort. Because a lot of times we work with attorneys or with other professionals in the real estate business, if everybody's not on the same page, if the realtor and the mortgage people and the title company and the attorney are not collaborating together, it causes lots of miscommunication and dropping the ball and things that just don't fall in the right way. So it's very important to be in sync with the people that we are working with. And at all times we're talking. I talk to Moshe like, hey, on deals we have, where's this, where's that, check in with this. And our goal is to make sure it's as easy as possible. We know, again, deals will get complicated, it's how that is. But our job is to make it as simple as possible.
Exactly. Real estate is not complicated. It's not easy. It is complicated, but when you have the right people, that makes it easy. Now, we prepared some questions.
Sure.
I don't know if we will go like a question. Let's keep it flowing.
Sure, of course.
But let's start with this. Why do we need real estate attorneys? Some people will they find a seller with a broker, whatever it is. They get a deal done and they send the title and done. Why do we need an attorney? Why do we need extra people in the deal?
That's a great question, Moshe. And I'll tell you what we do. So anytime you have a real estate deal, the basis for the deal is the contract, right? The contract is like the roadmap to how we get to the end of the deal. It includes important terms like purchase price and contingencies and other terms that are very important to the deal proceeding. If you don't have a lawyer who's experienced looking over the contract and helping the client, either the buyer or seller of the deal, then the buyer or seller is at risk of being liable for things they shouldn't be liable for, right? I'll give you a great example. In the real estate contract that you guys prepare, in the standard template real estate contract, it says on there that the seller is required to pay for half of the title fees. It's in the contract. It's in every contract there is by real estate brokers. Now, it's not your fault, Moshe. You can't change it. You have the New Jersey NJR, whatever form it's called, of the real estate contract. And it says in there, I think it's paragraph 23, I forgot what paragraph it is, 26 possibly, that it says in there very clearly, sellers are required to pay half the title fees. Now, if you don't have a lawyer that looks at the contract as a seller's attorney, you're going to have to pay those fees at the end, right? So there are things in the contract that you have with a realtor that the lawyer knows to always adjust and to take out because it affects the parties. That's an example for a seller. How about a buyer, for example, right? Let's just say, you know what, I don't need an attorney as a buyer. I have a contract, I have a mortgage broker, I'm set to go. The problem is on the buyer's side, another example, is the contract says in paragraph 8 that the deadlines you have are hard and fast deadlines. They're automatic. So if you have a deposit due on day 10, or you have an inspection due on day 14, and you don't ask your request, waive your rights. And it's important to have an attorney, during attorney review, add more language into the letter to further protect their clients. That's just a couple of examples. there are tons more things that lawyers do throughout the process, from the contract, the review process to the end, that we value to the process. But if we're not in there, then the buyer or seller is exposed to things they shouldn't be exposed to. And unfortunately, they get hit very, very bad. I've had deals where I step in afterwards. A client doesn't hire an attorney. And later on, I say, oh, I want to get one involved. And it's hard to unwind all this bad activity that happened in the past. But our job as lawyers is to help protect our clients and make sure that our clients are protected.
So you have people coming to you that they started without an attorney, and all of a sudden there's starting a big argument or whatever it is. And
Yes. And not only that, I feel also people get pressured in thinking, well, it's too expensive or it's not worth it for us. Most legal fees are not that expensive relative to the purchase of the property. And it's a wise investment to invest in an attorney to review the documents for you, to review the contract for you, to review the closing documents. Let's say, for example, I've had clients where we have a closing and the title company charges them fees they shouldn't be charging them. Now, if they don't have someone look it over, they don't know what's standard. So it's very important to have people that are professionals, that this is their job, to review the documents, review the numbers, be involved in the process, and help move things along. I'd also say, as well as a lawyer, is that our job is not to control our clients. That's not our job, nor should it be. Our job is to give advice, right? I have clients, for example, that want to buy a piece of property. And they're saying to me, David, I'll buy the property as is. I don't need an inspection. That's fine. I'm not telling you have to do one. I'll give you the risks. I'll educate you on what can go wrong. If you want to proceed, that's up to you afterwards. But the goal of a lawyer is not to disrupt a deal or to cause a deal to be blown up or to derail it. Our job is to give our clients feedback and guidance and advice and shepherd the deal along, move it along through the process. It's like a trunk to the result.
So I want to hop in on this. This is why it's very important to work with an attorney like David, because I have seen sometimes attorneys, they take the deal personal and they will kill the deal because they don't like the deal. The seller's okay, the buyers, they don't like this. I've seen it.
It's horrible because if you have clients that want to buy a piece of property and the lawyer's hubris and his own ego or her ego says, I want this term in the contract, and they don't even ask their clients. Like, I've had deals where I know that the client didn't even know this was being asked for on his behalf. I knew afterwards that the attorney had made a request of a certain thing that his client didn't care about, but he said it should be in the contract. Says who? No one told you to do that. You got to follow your client's advice. If your client says to you, you want this, by all means. Of course, you advocate for your clients. You're there to make sure they're protected, but you got to make sure your client wants you to do. It's very important.
So we know in New Jersey it's a little bit upside down. We don't put in offers. We send contracts.
Yes.
Maybe you can explain why this is?
Yes. Well, there's a history on this. Many years ago, there was a lawsuit or some dispute between the realtors in New Jersey and the lawyers in New Jersey. And both of them wanted to have control of the process. The realtor said, it's our deals, it's our contracts, we should do it. The lawyers shouldn't be involved. The lawyer said, no, we're the lawyers, we want to be involved in the process. So they made a deal. The state said, we'll make a deal. The realtors could start the process with their form/realtor form contract, which is a boilerplate form that in every deal you put in your name and the address and the separate terms of the deal. But the lawyers are able to finish it off, right? The realtor started off, the lawyers finish it off. This way they work as a tandem to finalize the contract. And that's why we do it this way. Other states like New York do it a different way. They do inspections first before we go into contract. But in Jersey, the way it's done this way is to make a deal to make sure the realtors and the lawyers are happy with the process.
Okay, that's interesting. Sounds like a lot of ego over here.
Yeah, this is, and many people are upset about it now. They're saying, oh, we want to change the process. Yes, in South Jersey, for example, people don't use lawyers as much as do in North Jersey. But for the most part, the lawyer's there, again, not to disrupt the deal or to add his own ego. It's just to make sure the client's protected.
Now, I understand once you put an offer, it's not binding yet, right?
Correct.
What's the point that you can say that the contract is binding and you must perform?
That's a good question, Moshe. So what really happens is that when you have a realtor involved, like Moshe does, you have an offer on a house. So you want to put an offer on a house, you submit the offer through the realtor form contract. What that form is it's blank spaces for your information, your name, it has on there the property address, the purchase price, the deposit, etc. And then what happens is we start a process called attorney review within 3 days of that being signed. Until the attorney letter is signed, either party can walk away. So I've had deals, for example, where a buyer puts an offer on a house on Thursday, and he went to the realtor, and we started a attorney review. And by Monday, the buyer says, I have second thoughts. It's not where I want it to be. The house is not where I want it to be. It's not next to my friends, or whatever reason it is. They want to walk away, they can walk away.
Doesn't need to give a reason.
No. There's no reason required. Walk away because he wants to walk away. And until the letter from the lawyer is signed, either side can walk away. If you're the seller side and you have better offers coming in, you could drop the first buyer and go to the second buyer if you want to, depending on the strategy you have with your realtor. So until the attorney letter is signed, either side can walk away. But once the attorney letter is signed by both parties, then we have a deal, we're locked in, and we have ability, of course, to walk away based on the contract. But you just can't walk away because you want to walk away.
So this is a misconception because some people think that as long as they didn't give a deposit, it's not binding.
Correct.
That's not true.
Correct. That's very untrue, right? Legally speaking wise, the law is, and once you have a signed contract, then you are bound to perform under the contract. You can't say I'm deposit is the one that makes the contract pre-bound. That's correct.
What's the biggest legal mistake you see buyers or sellers making during the process?
So I think the biggest mistake people make, is having the wrong professionals hired, right? If you have the wrong people helping you out, they're not on top of stuff, they're not responding timely, they're not understanding what you need from them, that could be the biggest mistake there is, right? If you have a lawyer, I'll give you an example. Now, I have deals currently now where the seller wants to close, like they want to close tomorrow. And it matters to them because the longer the seller holds a property, they have to keep the upkeep, they have to keep the power on, they have to keep the AC on because it's really hot outside, right, today, right? They have to pay for the taxes and the insurance. And they want to, the house is empty, they want to move on. Their attorney, taking his time, he didn't prepare documents yet. He's saying, I'm not rushing at all, why should I rush? So this client is yelling at us, I want to close, move faster. So this client is losing thousands of dollars daily or weekly because his lawyer's not moving fast enough. So I think the biggest mistake you can make as any person is hiring the wrong people to help you out.
Yeah.
What are things you see like mistakes in the industry, lawyers or that kind of stuff, based on your perspective as a realtor, of course?
I mean, this is a big understand. Real estate demands a lot of patience and understanding to people. If you deal with the right people, people take ego, and once ego comes in, it just kills deals.
Yeah.
I just said to someone, I cannot convince you to buy, I cannot convince you to sell. It's not my job.
Right.
My job is not to convince you to buy or sell. My job is to help you buy and sell.
Correct.
So eventually, people want to buy or sell. That's why they're here, why we're even talking.
Of course.
But sometimes when ego comes in, that messes up everything.
Yes. I think you're right. I think on that point, we have situations where people have a walkthrough. And what a walkthrough is that before the closing happens, the buyer gets a chance to see the property one last time and make sure the property is fine, that the property is cleaned out, things are functioning the way they should be functioning. And I've seen deals where they've delayed the deal for days because of a hole in the wall or a small issue that can cost a few $100s to fix, small pennies to fix. But their ego is, I'm not letting the seller win, I'm not letting the buyer win. And it costs them more money because every day it pushes the closing off, they're paying more to the mortgage company or taxes on the property than the issue itself costs. So it's hard because real estate is very emotional. People get very emotionally tied, especially if you're selling your house for 40 years or you're buying your first house. It's easy to get emotionally trapped and sucked into the process and blinded by what your feelings are. And it's not uncommon, but it's important to just focus on dollars and cents. It's hard, it's easy to say, it's hard to do. Focus dollars and cents, focus on what you really care about, focus on what it means to forward and not by getting back at the other side.
Now, before selling or buying, how should someone prepare?
That's a good question. Well, let's start with the buying side first, right? The first thing you should do before buying is make sure you have the money to buy the property, right? So let's say you're a first-time homeowner and you want to buy a house. You have to know what your budget is. It's very important to first seek out a mortgage professional, either a broker or banker, that can review your credit, tell you what you could afford, and at least explain to you what your budget could be. Because if you put in a deal on an offer on a house, and then you find out months later that you're denied by your mortgage company, you wasted all this money on inspections and appraisal and on the deal. So it's better at least to come up initially and know where you are financially. What can you afford? What can you not afford? And then you can proceed, once you have your range of what is within your budget, to look for the houses that will fall into your budget. That's the buyer's side. On the seller side...
Now, is there any from the legal side that you should be aware of?
Yes, I would say that sometimes we have clients that have issues with their credit and judgments against them. Let's say, for example, they were sued by a creditor by a credit card hospital for medical bills, and those bills are not paid off, and there's a judgment against them, the bank's going to require them to be paid off before the closing happens. So if you have...
Even if you're a buyer?
Yes. Because what happens is that, let's say somebody owes a debt to a hospital, and the hospital sues the buyer for the debt that's owed for medical bills, and the hospital wins the case, and the hospital files a lien on that person's name in the state. That's a lien on all the properties the buyer owns, or will own in the future. And that means the bank will not lend them money until the judgment is paid off. So I'll give you an example. During COVID 2020, I had a client who was an ER doctor. Both of them they were husband and wife, both ER doctors, very high regarded professionals and well known for their craft as doctors. And they were buying a property and selling a property. They didn't realize, or they thought they realized, that they had on them a $500,000 tax lien for the IRS.
Wow.
Right? Now, if they didn't pay that off, they can't buy anything or sell their house. They're selling and buying. There was a sell and buy situation. So I think it's important to know beforehand, if you're a buyer especially, your credit. If you have a lien on you or a judgment against you by a creditor, that has to pay it off at closing, otherwise you can't buy the property. Same with the seller side. If you have a lien against you on the seller side, you have a tax lien or you have a judgment against you for some kind of debt you owe, you have to pay that off before we close. So a little bit of introspective work is helpful to be honest with yourself and to know what's necessary to be paid off before you buy or sell the house.
Just on a side note, I never knew this, that you can't buy with judgments. Good advice for everyone in the 20s. Sometimes you get older, financially you get more entangled and stuff.
Sure.
On purpose, not on purpose. But as long as you have a clean record, buy a house because you might not be able to later.
Of course. People get very messy later on. They get more obligations on them as they go on older. Better to get in early while you can because that's the best chance of opportunity you have to get it for yourself. What
was the hardest deal you have ever worked on?
Well, I would say this deal that I talked about earlier was one of the hardest ones with the tax lien because I remember correctly, the deal happened in April 2020. So this is during COVID, the heart of COVID, and our client had to move out of their house and sell and buy their house, the next house, on the same day. And they had this last minute lien that they pay off from the IRS. The IRS was closed, it was COVID. We need a payoff letter from the IRS, how much was due, and paid off at closing. It was a mess. If I remember correctly, the buyer signed documents outside of some office somewhere against COVID on top of a car, and he put stuff in storage for a day or so. It was very messy, figuring everything out logistically speaking wise, getting the seller and the buyer side all on the same page with the title company, with the IRS payoffs, and make sure the buyer was not homeless for a couple of days. So it was very complicated. Thankfully, he's fine now. He's moved in nicely, but we worked it out in the end.
So he couldn't do anything before he actually paid off $500,000.
Yeah, and not only that, so what happened was...
He paid an expensive price on his house.
Yes. Well, what happened was that he didn't realize until we did a title search that he had a judgment against him.
He never received letters in the mail.
So he thought he was on a payment plan, and he wasn't.
Wow.
That was the mistake. That was the issue. And the payment plan was not a real payment plan. It was a payment plan that still had lien on his properties. So it's not he was the person who did it with fault at all. It was just misunderstanding. And the stress we had was coordinating all the moving parts during COVID of April 2020. It was like right where it started. And getting people moved in, getting people set up nicely was complicated. And we worked it out in the end. But getting the IRS on the phone, getting a payoff letter from the IRS was not easy at all. He worked it out. Thank God he's okay now.
Wow. Do you have deals that go smoothly? I have a feeling like every real estate something.
Right. It's funny because I always have clients call me on the phone and say, David, I have an easy deal for you. I say, don't talk too fast because you always say it's easy in the beginning and hopefully it is easy. And there are deals. I have had deals, thank God, that was easy and it was smooth to work out. But I think the smart thing is not to go in thinking I want easy deals. I want to work to make deals easy as possible. That's the difference. Because at the end of the day, they're always going to have problems. And our goal is not to say, oh, do you discouraged by these problems? To work through them and find ways to resolve them.
Is there something that we as realtors can do to make things easier?
I think communication is very important. I think that when you have a buyer side, make sure that the lender and the buyer are talking together at all times. Make sure the attorney knows who the lender is, put them on the same email chain or phone call. Communication is the most important thing, I think, in a deal. If all the people are not communicating properly, then things get messed up and things get sideways. So it's very important for the lender, the mortgage broker, the attorneys, the realtors, the buyer, seller, all be on the same page. Now, if you're a seller, you're not talking to the mortgage broker. I'm talking on the buyer side, right? The buyer side, mortgage broker, mortgage banker, and the client. It's very important. I think that's the biggest I think flaw I see in the industry. And I think it's the best thing to do is make sure that everyone's communicating effectively.
Communication is key. I
Yes.
mean, even putting together a deal, it's communication. Everything is about communication.
100%.
That's why I don't understand some people in the business. You try to call them. You can wait for days till you get a call back.
Sure.
Text.
Sure.
If you don't have the basics, how are you in the business?
100%. And not only that, I had a deal recently last week or so where my client was a seller and the buyer had their own attorney. And the lawyer, we signed the contract on Friday. And we didn't get a letter from the lawyer till at least Wednesday. So we had 4 or 5 days where this buyer's in limbo. He eventually fired his lawyer, had a new lawyer instead. But this buyer could have lost the deal because if the seller got another offer in the meantime, that was better, he could have dropped the buyer and that'd be it afterwards. So listen, people have lives. I'm not saying people should be slaves to their clients. Understandably, people have normal hours, you have nights and weekends, totally. But you have to be responsive and talk and communicate and email and call back. It's very, very important.
Is there any legal advice, like before signing contract? You mentioned judgments. But from a legal perspective, how to be protected, or if they have a good attorney, they should be.
They have a good attorney, right? It's good lawyers put in the right contract to help, to help do that. I would say the best thing is helping you out.
At what point do you need the attorney to win the deal? When you're putting the offer, like when you calling the attorney? Hey.
Question. So it depends on the deal. So I have most clients involve the attorney after the offer is accepted. That's what most people do. But I'm always available beforehand. Sometimes I have clients who want to bounce ideas off me or want to, compare notes or perspectives on the offer. Seller, they want to see what offer is possibly better. They want to get my feedback on it. I'm happy to be involved in the deal.
Are you seller comes with you with 2 offers? Would you give him advice on the offer?
Not necessarily. I would say is that goal, like I said at the beginning, was not to push a client a certain way, is to be a sounding board and get feedback. So I always say when putting an offer in or even a seller accepting an offer is what's important to you, what matters to you more. So the seller says, for example, that it's important for the seller to, to stay in the house longer, for example. So let's say we have an offer, the seller wants to be in the house for 5 months. And the buyer, 2 offers in front of them. One is longer, one is shorter. Maybe the offer longer is a better idea. So I wouldn't say I would push them toward one offer, but I would help or at least guide them along and help them see what's better for them long term.
Have you ever saved a client from a major, you got some legal mistakes or problems?
Question, yes. So 2 years ago, a client who was buying a house and he did an oil tank scan. Now in New Jersey, unfortunately, a lot of houses have underground oil tanks on the property. And those tanks are dangerous because they could possibly leak oil into the soil and contaminate the soil. So we always recommend our clients to do an oil tank scan as part of their inspection process. And this client did one, and the scan came up empty, no tank. So we thought we were fine. However, we also pulled the town records. Town records showed that there was a tank in the ground that was filled with sand 10 years ago. So we said to ourselves, hold on a second, the scan came back empty, but the report says that there's a tank in the ground. So what happened here? So we talked to the seller. The seller said, no, the seller told us, at least the lawyers, that the tank was removed 10 years ago. So I said, fine. Then have the town update the records. And why are the records showing it's still in the ground? I'm happy for the town to say it's not in there. At least want to make sure the records are clear that it was removed beforehand. It's not a problem. Back and forth a few times with the lawyer. And the oil tank scan person that we hired to scan it was the same the seller had hired to remove the tank 10 years ago. But he had records at all 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. We said, fine, if you're then go there and have the town. The town told the tank person, we're not letting you update the records till we inspect the property again. And we found underneath the house was a tank in the ground. And the scan missed it because underground, underneath part of the house, underneath the patio part of the house. So the town records showed it being as an issue because it was still in the ground. It was still there.
Wow.
And Once it came out, it was leaking in the ground also.
Oh my.
It cost $15,000 to remediate everything. And thankfully, our client avoided that entire catastrophe. The seller paid for the entire bill.
Because people don't realize they are buying now, but they might sell it 10 years from now. So
of course.
They could say, you know what, let me just close. Why do I know tank scam? I'll just go. But they forget.
Of course.
That at one point they want to be a seller.
Of course. Life happens. You want to sell property, things change. You want to move to different states. Things happen in life, of course. So we saved the clients a lot of money because he was able to avoid paying all those costs for the oil tank contamination. Sorry.
How do you, if you have sometimes buyers that come to you to say, you know what, I want to get out of this contract, or sellers, which one is easier to get out?
Where part of the process are we? Where is this in the process?
Let's say we are over to interview submitted the made inspection, satisfied inspection, because inspection you could usually demand stuff, and then but let's say over inspection.
So I have a client on the property. He signed the contract in February, and he's supposed to close in August. And a month ago, I think roughly maybe like May time, we're done with inspections, mortgage, all done. The seller's lawyer called me on the phone and said, well, my client's not sure about selling the property anymore. And I said to the attorney, what do you mean not sure?
You are the buyer.
On the buyer side. I said, Ms. Lawyer, the contract is signed already. You can't just walk away. Well, we're not sure. We'll give the deposit back to you guys. It's not a big deal. I said, it's a very big deal. I asked my client first I asked my client, do you want the house still? Because if he wants to walk away, I'm not fine, right? Let him, that's fine. So I asked my client, yes, I want the house. Of course I want the house. Great. I went to part two. I said to the lawyer, listen, you have a signed contract. You don't close the property with us, we're going to sue you. And we're winning the case in court automatically. There's no excuse for you. You have a contract, you got to perform. I threatened the attorney, and at the end of the day, she backed off. And we'll see in August, of course. But we're closing the property in August. So the contract's a contract. You can't just walk away from a contract. You have pause. You have reason to walk away, that's fine. But you can't just walk away because you want to walk away. That's not allowed.
Now, if a buyer does want to walk away, what can they do?
It's a problem. It's not advisable. That's why I tell the clients, once we send the attorney review letter, deal's a deal, right? You got to be. This is a serious situation.
The problem is it's not like going to the grocery, you buy a bottle of milk.
Sure.
It's a lot of emotions.
Of course.
Of course, we spoke before that we shouldn't have emotions.
Of course.
Too much ego involved.
Right.
It is a lot of emotions and time.
Of course.
And there is this thing that's called buyer's remorse.
Of course. Sometimes
you get it even before closing.
Right.
Usually by the closing you're happy.
Right, hopefully. Right.
But sometimes not. But
no, sure.
Usually by closing everyone's happy. Even biggest arguments, by closing day everyone usually is happy. Anyways, sometimes after you're in it and you want to get out of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a problem. And I hear you. I think also part of the reason why we have attorney review, we have the contract and the realtor and the attorney part, is to allow the deal to breathe a little bit. Because if you were a buyer or a seller and you were obligated to do the contract once the realtor signed it, you're locked in. And I've had plenty of time where buyers say, after the contract is signed with the realtor, maybe not. Or seller, maybe not, change my mind. And that few days allows the emotions to settle. But then I also want my clients usually, like, once you sign, you got to proceed. You can't play games here. It's not allowed.
Unless you get denied.
Of course, listen, again, if you have cause, you have reasons that if you're actually not a label because of the view or your inspection problems, then of course you can walk away. We're talking about just second thoughts. That's not allowed.
The seller also doesn't have it.
Of course not. No.
Would you advise people to buy properties as is?
So what does that mean to you? What do you mean by it?
So honestly,
right?
Since COVID, I guess, such deal became as is deal.
Right.
But at the end of the day, everyone as is. You make inspection, and especially now when...
Right. So when you say as is, do you mean leaving as is?
So let's say waiving inspections.
Right.
Well, what do you think about it?
I always say this because I feel like a lot of clients don't understand what as is means, right? And as is really means, every deal is as is, right? Every deal is, what does as is mean? It means that there are two parts of as is. Number one...
Is as like a legal term?
Not really. It is, but it's not. In that it is a legal term in that it means that the deal is the way it is, but how it is the further defined in the letter from lawyers. That's the point, right? Like I said before in the beginning. If you have a good lawyer involved, they will flesh out, explain what the as is aspect is of the deal. So as this really means is once a deal closes, it's done. There's no warranties. There's no guarantees. If the next day the house breaks, it's your house. And part two of that is that the seller is not required to make any repairs at all, any inspection requests you have. That's every deal in Jersey. Now, if you want to say you would a buyer waive the inspections, means that the buyer buy the house no matter what, it's a risk because the buyer then would have to assume the liability of those items. Now, I have clients that are investors or builders that are able with the naked eye to see a house and know and understand if the house is worth what they're paying for. But without doing more inspections like an underground oil tank scan, which you can't see underground, or a sewer inspection, for example, then you're buying the house blindly. And like I said, it's not my choice or my power to tell clients not to do things. I give them the option. Tell them this is the risk involved. This is what would happen if you buy the house. If you want to proceed, that's fine. You're allowed to.
So as I said before, you can advise, but
of course,
if they really don't want to do inspection,
I warn them. I tell them what the story is, and they have to understand what the rights are, of course.
What are some common myths that people have about real estate law that you feel people should know?
I feel that with lawyers, some people think that a lawyer's job is to decide for you. And I think that's the case at all. This is the same comments before. People feel that a lawyer is gonna decide what you've done, and that's not our job. Our job is to explain to the clients what the risks are and give them the options, right? You want option A, B, or C. We can't tell you which one's good for you because we don't know what's good for you. You have so many internal factors, financial, emotional, personal, that really determine how you want to proceed on both seller and buyer side. So really it's not our place as attorneys to give you what's better. We can recommend you things, we give you advice. And our job is to define things and explain things in a simple way so you understand what the options are in front of you and what can happen if you pick either choice down the road.
Anything else you would like to?
I think we covered a lot of things in this not podcast, I guess. And if there are any questions, people can reach out to me on social media. People email me or call me. I'm always here to talk about stuff, to bounce ideas off. I have people that call me all the time for different things they're going through and different ideas.
Do you give like investment advice, or that's not?
Not necessarily, because again, it's not a place. You know, I can't say if a house is not worth a certain price. That's not necessarily our place at all. But I think I'm a good sounding board. People can call me for different things.
I had once. This is a house in East Orange, 3-family. The guy's an old guy. Finally got a deal together, and the attorney decided that it's too cheap.
Right.
Deal.
Wow.
Deal's off.
Yeah.
He still didn't sell yet.
Of course. That's not our place. Our place is not to give a financial advice or to purchase price of the house or if it's worth it or not. That's not our place. That's your job, realtors. I always say, know your place. You are here, your lawyers, this is your lawyer department. The realtor does his job. Job properly, the deal will be fine. Stay in your lanes and work as a team. It's very important.
I guess we covered it all, or?
Yeah, I think so. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, Moshe.
Thanks so much.
Of course.
And again, it's really a pleasure to work together with David. He is available, not 24, but almost.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Moshe. Thank you, guys. Have a nice day.